Open the door! Open the door! The captain pounds frantically against reinforced steel. His own aircraft, his own cockpit, and he can't get in. Inside, 150 passengers scream as their plane dives toward the mountains. Outside the cockpit door, the captain fights desperately to save them. But the door won't budge, and the man inside, he's not trying to save anyone. No hijacking, no terrorists, no technical failure. This is Germanwings Flight 9525. Before we dive into this shocking story, hit that subscribe button and notification bell for more aviation mysteries. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What we discovered will absolutely shock you. This video discusses sensitive topics. Viewer discretion advised. March 24, 2015. Barcelona Airport bustles with the usual pre-dawn activity. Germanwings Flight 9525 sits at the gate. An Airbus A320-211, registration D-AIPX, 24 years old but meticulously maintained. This aircraft had flown thousands of flights without incident. The crew arrives for their second flight of the day. They'd already completed the outbound journey from Düsseldorf that morning, landing in Barcelona at 7:57 a.m. A quick turnaround, standard procedure. Captain Patrick Sondenheimer, 34 years old, 6,000 flight hours, recently promoted to captain after years as a first officer. His colleagues described him as professional, competent, above standard in all evaluations. First Officer Andreas Lubitz, 27, 900 flight hours on the A320. Young but qualified, had passed every check, every evaluation. His instructors noted no concerns about his attitude or behavior during flights. 4 flight attendants completed the crew, all experienced, all ready for what should have been a routine 2-hour flight to Düsseldorf. At 9 a.m., Flight 9525 pushes back from the gate. 144 passengers settle in for the journey home. Families returning from vacation, business travelers, students, none aware they had just minutes to live. The Airbus A320 taxis to runway 07R. Engines spool up. At exactly 9:007, the aircraft lifts off into clear Spanish skies. Everything appears normal. First Officer Lubitz handles the controls as pilot flying. Captain Sondenheimer manages communications and monitors the flight. At 9:02, autopilot engages. The aircraft climbs steadily through Spanish airspace, bound for cruising altitude. 9:12 a.m. A cabin crew member enters the cockpit. Standard practice. The 3 crew members chat about their Barcelona stopover. Casual conversation, normal crew interaction. The flight attendant leaves at 9:15. The pilots discuss their delayed departure, coordinating with air traffic control to make up time. 9:27 a.m. Flight 9525 levels off at 38,000 feet. Perfect flying conditions, clear skies, light winds. The kind of day pilots love. French air traffic control takes over. Marseille Control Center. The aircraft appears as a steady green blip on their radar screens. 9:29 a.m. Controllers transfer the flight to a different frequency. Standard procedure over busy European airspace. At 9:30 a.m., Captain Sondenheimer acknowledges the final clearance. Direct Irmar, Merci, Germanwings 18 Golf. His voice is calm, professional, normal. These would be the last words anyone would hear from Flight 9525. 9:30 a.m. 8 seconds after that final radio call, Captain Sondenheimer's voice fills the cockpit. "I'm leaving the cockpit." He asks First Officer Lubitz to take over radio communications. Lubitz acknowledges. Again, completely routine. Pilots leave the cockpit regularly during cruise flight. The sound of the captain's seat moving. Buckles unfastening. 9:30:24 a.m. The unmistakable sound of the cockpit door opening. Then closing. Captain Sondenheimer is now in the passenger cabin. First Officer Lubitz sits alone at the controls of Flight 9525. For 29 seconds, nothing changes. The aircraft continues its steady course toward German airspace, autopilot maintaining altitude and heading. Then, at 9:30:53 a.m., something happens that changes everything. The selected altitude on the flight control unit changes from 38,000 feet to 100 feet. 1 second later, the autopilot switches to open descent mode. Both engines reduce to idle thrust. Flight 9525 begins to descend. Lubitz has just programmed the aircraft to fly into the ground. 9:31 a.m. The Airbus A320 starts losing altitude at 1,700 feet per minute, then faster, soon reaching 3,500 feet per minute. This is not an emergency descent. No technical failure, no loss of pressurization. This is controlled, deliberate, programmed. In the passenger cabin, passengers begin to notice the sensation of descent, ears popping, concerned glances out windows as the ground grows closer. 9:33 a.m. Lubitz adjusts the speed settings. Multiple times, the aircraft accelerates in its descent, now traveling at over 300 knots toward the French Alps. 9:33:47 a.m. Air traffic control notices the deviation. Germanwings 18 Golf, what is your cleared flight level? Silence. The controller tries again, and again. 3 attempts in 30 seconds. No response from Flight 9525. Controllers watch helplessly as the aircraft descends through 30,000 feet, then 25,000. The radar blip diving toward the mountains. 9:34:31 a.m. Back in the cockpit, a sound breaks the silence. The door access buzzer. Someone wants to enter the cockpit. 1 second. That's all it lasts. Then, nothing. Captain Sondenheimer has returned from the cabin. He enters his access code into the keypad. The system should unlock the door. It's designed to allow crew members back into the cockpit. But nothing happens. He tries again. Still nothing. The cockpit voice recorder captures what happens next. The sound of someone trying the door handle. Knocking. 9:35 a.m. The captain uses the cabin interphone. The signal sounds in the cockpit. 3 seconds of audio. No response. Meanwhile, Flight 9525 continues its programmed descent. 25,000 feet. 20,000 feet. Racing toward the alpine peaks below, air traffic controllers declare an emergency. They try multiple frequencies: the International Emergency Frequency, military channels, Germanwings 18 Golf, if you can hear this transmission, squawk 7600. Silence. The French military scrambles fighter jets. But it's too late. The aircraft is already too low, moving too fast toward terrain no fighter can protect. 9:35:32 a.m. The knocking becomes violent. Passengers have now realized something is terribly wrong. The aircraft is in a steep descent, the ground rushing up to meet them. Voices can be heard through the door, muffled but urgent. Someone calls, "Open the door!" But the door remains locked. Inside the cockpit, First Officer Lubitz sits at the controls. The cockpit voice recorder picks up the sound of his breathing. Calm, regular, controlled. He makes no attempt to answer the radio calls, no attempt to unlock the door. He simply sits and waits. 9:37 a.m. Flight 9525 descends through 15,000 feet. The sounds from outside the cockpit intensify. Passengers screaming. Flight attendants pounding on the reinforced door. Captain Sondenheimer shouting commands. These cockpit doors were redesigned after September 11th, built to withstand terrorist attacks, bulletproof, explosion-resistant, designed to keep threats out. Now, that same security feature keeps help from getting in. 9:39 a.m. The violence against the door reaches a crescendo. Passengers and crew using whatever they can find. Desperate attempts to break through. On the flight data recorder, something appears. Small inputs on Lubitz's control stick. Tiny movements lasting about 30 seconds. For a moment, investigators would wonder if he was fighting for control, trying to pull up, attempting to save the aircraft, but the movements are too small. Insufficient to disengage the autopilot. They change nothing. Flight 9525 continues its programmed descent toward the Alps. 9:41 a.m. The ground proximity warning system activates. Terrain! Terrain! Pull up! Pull up! The automated voice fills the cockpit. Urgent, insistent, 60 seconds to impact. Outside the door, the sounds of desperate people trying everything to get inside. Inside, one man sitting calmly at the controls as his aircraft flies towards certain death. 9:41 a.m. Master warning sounds, multiple alarms. The aircraft's systems screaming that impact is imminent. The breathing on the cockpit voice recorder continues. Steady, calm, until 7 seconds before impact. Then silence. 9:41. Flight 9525 strikes the mountainside at Prades-Haute-Bléon in the French Alps. The aircraft hits at 434 miles per hour. The impact is instantaneous, catastrophic. All 150 people on board perish immediately. The wreckage spreads across 4 hectares of rocky terrain. The largest piece of debris measures just 3 meters. Everything else pulverized by the violence of impact. Air traffic controllers in Marseille stare at empty radar screens. The aircraft simply vanished from their displays at 9:41 a.m. A routine morning flight has become one of aviation's darkest chapters. But the mystery is just beginning. Within hours, French investigators arrive at the crash site. The terrain is treacherous, rocky, steep, accessible only by helicopter. They find the cockpit voice recorder on March 24th. The flight data recorder takes longer. Found April 2nd, damaged but readable. When investigators listen to the recordings, they hear something that changes everything. The sound of breathing in the cockpit, continuous, calm, right until the end. But only one person breathing. The flight data confirms the impossible. The aircraft was under control, following programmed inputs. No technical failure, no emergency. Someone deliberately flew Flight 9525 into the mountain. The question becomes, who? Analysis of the recordings reveals the breathing belongs to the first officer. Andreas Lubitz remained conscious and in control throughout the entire descent. The captain never regained access to the cockpit. The passengers never had a chance. But why? What could drive a young pilot to murder 150 innocent people? On March 24th, that secret became a weapon. The investigation concludes that Andreas Lubitz deliberately crashed Flight 9525. Suicide and mass murder. The system designed to protect aviation had failed. Medical confidentiality prevented doctors from reporting their concerns. Self-reporting requirements relied on honesty from the person least able to judge their own fitness. And 150 people paid the ultimate price. Today, aviation has changed. New rules require 2 people in the cockpit at all times. Enhanced mental health screening, better support systems for struggling pilots. But questions remain. How do we balance medical privacy with public safety? How do we detect the undetectable? How do we prevent the unprevented? The locked door of Germanwings. Flight 9525 opened a conversation about aviation safety that continues today. Because in the end, the greatest threat wasn't from outside the cockpit. It was from within. We honor the memory of the 150 souls who perished on Flight 9525 and keep their families in our thoughts and prayers. Remember to subscribe for more aviation mysteries and hit the notification bell to never miss an upload. What do you think? Could this tragedy have been prevented? Let me know in the comments below.